Welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast that's all about real conversations for real transformation. I'm your host, Kat Pulcinelli, professional speaker, MC, and best-selling international author. Here, we tackle the tough stuff, the mud that we all have found ourselves in. We talk about the pivots, the challenges, and the victories that shape our lives and our businesses. From overcoming trauma and finding your voice to navigating life's unexpected twists, we get raw, honest, and open. You'll hear from inspiring guests who share their stories of resilience, healing, and growth. Whether it's breaking through emotional abuse, embracing self-worth, or thriving in entrepreneurship, you'll find connection, empowerment, and the tools to keep you moving forward. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and get ready for stories that hit home and conversations that make a difference. Let's get real together. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I am so excited to have you here with me today, and oh my goodness, by the time this episode gets released, I believe it will be in the beginning of Q2, which is super exciting. I know we had a lot of redefining, resets, putting ourselves back into ourselves at the beginning of the year for the podcast, and now we get to dive into how do we continue to move forward? What are the resilient pieces? What are the things that have maybe held you back? Your stories that you've been telling yourself, and how can you take this new direction as you move into the second part of the year? So I'm super excited. You guys have no idea. I have been waiting for Nick for a while. I was super excited when they reached out. I got to watch his Oxford talk. By the way, we're going to make sure we drop that YouTube link in the show notes. You have to take the time to listen to it. It was amazing. But Nick, I'm so excited to have you as part of the podcast today.
So excited to be here, Kat. I'm ready. I'm ready to have a real chat with Kat.
Yes. I love it. So, like I do for all of my guests, instead of reading some bio to give people an idea, I'd like for you to let the audience know who are you and what it is that you do. So go ahead and fill us in, Nick.
Oh my goodness. So thank you for the question. That really what I'm doing today and who I am today, it all kind of starts back in 8th grade when I was at ski club with my friends. And Kat, I'm sure you can remember, and I'm sure the listeners can remember that when you were 14 years old, if you got released from school just even a little bit early, it was always a really big deal. So
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, we got released a little bit early, and my friends and I brought our snowboard gear onto the bus to get ready, so as not to miss a precious moment once we got to the mountain. We got to the mountain, and as the rest of the class migrated inside to get ready, not us. We were ready to go. We had to wait for the chairlift. And actually, on the chairlift ride up, we noticed that it was a little icy because it had been raining early in the day. So people were wiping out everywhere. That wasn't slowing us down, though. We knew we were pretty experienced at that point. We knew what we were doing. And where the chairlift went over was actually right over the terrain park. I know you're in Tennessee, so I might have to define this, like jumps and rails and that kind of thing. So I knew, Kat, as soon as I saw it, that I had to go off the biggest jump in the terrain park. I mean, there wasn't even a moment of thinking like,
What?
should I be careful, or maybe I shouldn't today because it had been raining. I mean, I was already thinking about what we were going to do after I landed that huge trick. Maybe grab a burger and fries in the lodge, or we could head over to the other chairlift for some runs on those trails. So got to the top, buckled into my snowboard, took a breath of that crisp winter air, and confidently charged towards that jump with all my speed. And going into the jump, I caught the edge of my snowboard, and that's the last thing that I remember. They wanted to actually bring a helicopter to the mountain to rush me to the hospital. And they couldn't because it was too windy. So they had to send in an ambulance. And Kat, out of all the paramedics, there was only one who could intubate right on the spot. And I needed that to be able to breathe. So lucky for me, he was one of the paramedics that showed up to the mountain that day. And whenever I'm retelling this story, it's always easy to remember just because there were three things that I credit for being able to be here today with you and your listeners and tell this story. The first one was the right paramedic showed up at the mountain. Second one, even though I didn't have a helmet on, the goggles that I had on were at the goggles that you put over your eyes. I feel like I have to for your audience, like really describe it. Were very thick with a lot of padding. I never would have fathomed that I would need them to brace my fall. But after I learned that from doctors, eyewitness accounts, experts, that not only did they brace my fall, as I continued to roll down the mountain and continued to hit my head against the ice, the goggles moved to cushion each blow between my head and the ice. And the third thing, and probably the most important, when I was taken to the intensive care unit, and I mean, I was out. I was in a coma in the ICU, unable to communicate with anyone. And the doctors, no fault of their own, Kat, they would come into my room to share progress updates with my parents. And they started to share right in front of me because they figured, oh, he's in a coma. He can't we're saying. But my mom stopped them and she said, no, not in front of him. Because she understood that even though I was in a coma, I was still taking in information. So she made the doctors step outside the room. And then once they were outside the room, that's where they shared with my parents that I probably wasn't going to be able to walk, talk, or eat on my own ever again. And even if I was able to come out of the coma, there was a good chance that I would need 24-hour care for the rest of my life. And to their credit, they didn't accept this like so many patients do in their families as a death sentence. So they took the information, thanked the doctors, and then what this allowed me to do is just treat it like any other situation. So as soon as I was aware of my surroundings and the work that was left in front of me, I treated it like any other situation. I ended up being in the coma. It was a partially induced coma for 3 weeks. I really don't remember a month because I was coming off that medication. So it was really at that point that the memories really started to come back, like slowly. They started to come back. And after a month, I was transported from the ICU to a rehab hospital in Boston. And that's where, for lack of a better term, Kat, my journey began. So it was at that time that I started to unknowingly use a system to not only make a full recovery, but run out of the hospital. And that's what I teach to this day. And both my keynotes, you've seen it. I introduced the idea in my Oxford talk, and also my one-on-one work with clients. And that's a STEP system. So STEP is an acronym. I'll give like a 10,000 foot view, and it'll probably make sense to you because this is like the same type of information that I go over in my Oxford talk. So STEP is an acronym, and it stands for support. Make sure that you have the support of your family and friends right from the beginning. This is going to have you falling back on relationships that you built prior to your setback. T is trust. Trust that once you take your first step, your next step is always going to be available to you. And this also starts by trusting that voice that you have inside of yourself. And we all have it. We all have that voice inside of ourselves, but too many of us will push it down, ignore it, say, oh, that's not realistic, or I could never do that, and rationalize with it. But you have to listen to it. And the way that I always like to illustrate this, Kat, is shortly after being transported to the rehab hospital, I can remember overhearing my parents talking to my team of doctors and therapists. and they were saying, okay, what do we need to do to make sure Nick makes a full recovery? This was even before I could talk. At this point, it was only mouthing words or whisper at best. So I remember overhearing that. And then I heard in the back of my head, you're going to run out of the hospital. So then I was able to communicate that to the rest of the team. And then running out of the hospital became our common goal. So that's the best way I can illustrate trust. And then E is energy. So maintaining your energy allows your body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. And medication has the potential to get in the way of that. So, I mean, obviously within reason here, that first night in the hospital after my accident cost, I think, $250,000. So if it wasn't for modern medicine, I wouldn't be here today. I couldn't say, no, I don't want the medication after a traumatic brain injury. So you need it. There's a time and place for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then P is persistence. So once you take your first step, keep getting up every day and taking your next step, no matter how small. And by continuing to move forward every day, you are building an unstoppable momentum. So I'll give away at the end a whole step, my ebook, which goes into detail on each one of those. But that's kind of a 10,000 foot view of the step system. So if you fast forward, Kat, less than 60 days later, and you can stop me at any point too if you have questions at anything, because I can tend to go and just talk. But so less than 60 days later, I ran out of the hospital. I realized my goal of running out of the hospital, and it really wasn't like my work was done. I had to continue to go to outpatient therapy for another 6 months, along with being tutored all summer long, 5 days a week, in order to continue on to high school with the rest of my classmates.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's a little surreal to me that, and it took a mentor of mine pointing it out to me. Gosh, I think it was over 4 years ago now. She pointed out to me that only 18 months later, after finishing my rehab, I got my start in real estate. I'm sure you understand. When you're younger, you get this, right? When you're younger, time is compressed.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
if you look at like 6 months out, 12 months out, 18 months out, it seems like a lifetime. However, it's the older I get, it's not a lot of time. So only 18 months later, after finishing my rehab, I got my start in real estate, and that was door knocking, pre-foreclosure doors, or homeowners that have received a notice of default letter from the bank. So what was pointed out to me from my mentor, she said, because this was so soon after recovering, only 18 months from recovering after you're being in a coma and learning how to walk, talk, and eat again, that this was a part of your recovery, going door to door and helping people out of their unfortunate situation. So it took a while for me to understand that and me to get, because I just figured, oh, well, like I already recovered. That's in the past.
Right.
This is what I'm doing now. And I continued doing that throughout the rest of high school. And I mean, evidence to me that it was successful. I knew, like, my job was to just set up meetings for one of our investors to meet with them the following week about potentially buying their home. And what's evidence to me that that venture was successful is that we own properties in the cities and towns that I door knocked for several years after that time. So that's what definitely made it fulfilling for me to see that we were actually helping people, and that was going to fruition, or if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I graduated high school, and then I got my real estate license, started helping buyers and sellers. And it was in 2012 that I actually developed a voice issue. It sounded like it was really straight and it was hard to get the words out. that was 2012. So I remember looking everywhere for an answer and I just couldn't figure it out. I went to an allergist, went to my primary care physician. No one could really give me an answer. Went to speech therapy on my own. No one could really give me an answer. Then I finally wound up in a voice specialist office and in Boston, that is. And there are only like 35 of these specialists in the whole continent, not even the US, the whole
Oh,
continent.
wow.
And one of them was close, fairly close to me. It's only a 2 hour ride away from me. And I resisted going to him at first, but I finally came around to the idea. And I can remember sitting in his office, Kat, after looking for an answer, going to therapy on my speech therapy on my own again,
Mm-hmm.
just not being able to find an answer. I remember sitting in his office and him walking in and hearing me speak, not even really interacting with him much, but him just hearing me speak. And he was like, "Oh, that? Yeah, we deal with that all the time. Go schedule a Botox injection in a couple weeks. We'll get it taken care of right away." I was like, my mouth was on the floor because I had been looking for an answer for like a year and no one could tell me what was up. And so I was really happy. I ended up in his office. I started getting the Botox injections in August of 2013. And it was for the next 6.5 years, I received Botox injections into my vocal folds probably 2, 3, or even 4 times a year, along with their higher level speech therapy. So I don't have a voice issue anymore. It worked its way out of my system. Now,
Mm-hmm.
and along with helping as a realtor, because I said I got my real estate lessons after high school. That was during that time. Then in 2014, at the end of 2014, or actually it was reviewing journals recently, I can see it was really halfway through 2014. My dad came to me and he approached me. He said that he was starting to buy all these properties creatively without using any of his credit or money. And he needed help. He needed someone to help him put them on the rent to own market and look for tenant buyers. This is different than being a realtor and putting them on the
Mm-hmm.
conventional market. So I finally came around to the idea that I could do this right alongside being a realtor. And so I started doing that. And that was the marketing, just helping him with the marketing. Then the marketing turned into, okay, well, I have to hire someone to handle all these buyer inquiries and buyer calls rather than pay someone else like an assistant or a VA or something. Why don't I pay you like per deal?
Absolutely.
So I finally came around to that idea, and then over the course of the next, it sounds like a small thing, but I mean, at that time, I was doing well as a realtor. I was like, no, I got my own
Mm-hmm.
thing going on over here. That's why I said I came around to the idea. And over the course of the next 13 months, Kat, my income just shifted. Where when I started with him, I was only making maybe 10 or 20% of my income with him, and the other 80 or 90% as a realtor. Over the course of the next 13 months, my income shifted where I was making the majority with him, and it didn't even make sense for me to keep my real estate license anymore. So in January of 2016, I let it go and I joined him full time as an investor. Um, During that process, we were able to develop a system and a process to put our rent to own buyers through to make sure that they were successful and that they were able to get their own loan at the end of their agreement. And we kind of fine tuned this process. And it was in 2016 that we started holding events once or twice a year where I always had the opportunity to tell my story of my snowboarding accident, much like I'm doing
Yeah.
today. but like on a smaller scale. And I always thought, oh, okay, I'm that's me listening to the voice in the back of my head, because ever since I've graduated from high school, I've always had this voice in the back of my head that's always saying, no matter what I'm doing to earn a living, yeah, great, Nick. But what you really need to be doing is telling your story from stage and helping trauma survivors, like accident survivors, through their challenge or trauma and then thrive with the rest of
Mm-hmm.
their lives. So I always thought I was doing that, talking at our events, once in a while. Kind of, but I mean, not really. It took until um 2019, me sharing my story at one of our events. And at this time, I was probably the longest. It was one of the longest I'd ever spoke before.
Mm-hmm.
And I I thought that was a big deal. It was maybe 20 minutes at the time. And then I had someone approach me after, and she said, complimented me on my talk and said if I was ever looking to fine tune my message and bring it to another level so I could reach the most amount of people and help the most amount of people, she could introduce me to a few coaches and mentors that have helped her along the way. Well, I wasn't ready yet. As I said, I was still in the final throes of that voice issue that I've been dealing with
Mm-hmm.
since 2012. But I always held on to the woman's card. Her name was Sharon Spano. And I finally reached out to her in May of 2021 after the voice issue had worked its way out of my system. I said, okay, I'm ready. What should I do? Who should I talk to? She introduced me to her mentor, Trisha Brook, and on that first call with Trisha, I shared my story and my goals and everything. And Trisha told me I should do the speaker salon that fall, 2021 in New York City. And that was $25,000 at the Triad Theater. And you get to be on stage at the Triad Theater with up to like 10 or 15 other speakers and work on crafting a 10 to 15-minute talk. And then
Yeah.
on the final week of the salon, you get to perform it for TEDx planners, event organizers and planners, podcast hosts, people that are looking for speakers for their stages. So I said yes. I had to follow this. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had to do this because this was about following that voice. Like back to following that voice in the back of my head. I just had to do this because I wasn't going to live the rest of my life without knowing what would have happened if I took this path.
Mm-hmm.
During the speaker salon, Trisha pitched the idea of what it would look like to work with her one on one. She told me that she works with speakers to help them build out their speaker platform. I didn't even know what that was.
You're in a completely different realm from,
Yeah, yeah. I didn't even know what that was. She told me that's 75,000, and I said I don't have that in my back pocket. Um, However, give me a week and I'll figure it out. And 6 days later, I wired her the money, and it's the best decision that I ever made. Uh, because now I'm sharing my story on podcasts like this, but also in 45 and 60-minute keynotes for
Mhm.
brain injury associations and brain injury alliances and other organizations that support individuals that are going through trauma, whether at their annual events or on like webinars for them. Like I did a webinar for the Brain Injury Association of America that they only run a couple times a year. So, I mean, all of that wouldn't have been possible if I didn't say yes to work with Trisha in that 3-second decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to break right here just a second because I want people to understand like we went from potentially never walking, talking, or being able to feed yourself for the rest of your life, right? All the way to where you are at now. And I want to go back to you've brought this up a couple of times. You talk about following that voice. this is so funny. I literally had this conversation in the car with my youngest one. So my boys are 20 and 18. My youngest one is finishing out high school and he's got some big goals. And he had a doctor's appointment. And anyway, one of the things he's thinking about doing is going to firefighting. And there was a truck on the side, and he got back into the car. And as we were driving home, he's like, I almost asked them, like, hey, can I just look at your truck? And I was like, why didn't you? And he was like, well, figured they were on their lunch break and I didn't want to interrupt. And I was like, dude, no, always ask. I was like, what's the worst thing that can happen, right? You get rejected. We get rejected all the time for things, but it's weird. And I've been on the other side of not understanding why these really weird nudges, right? Or that little voice that's like, you should do this, or you should make this phone call, or hey, you should go talk to that person over there, right? And like you said in the beginning, we use our logic to talk ourselves out of it because we're like, okay, that doesn't make sense. A to B does not connect to C. That's like A to Z. And I'm really confused. And it's really interesting even in your life and the directions and all the things that you've talked about, but I see it in mine as well with all the things that I've been through and coming from being in an abusive relationship all the way to now sharing my story today and helping people make those connections and bridge those gaps and educate people like you're talking about doing. But it did take listening to those small nudges, right? Those little things that you hear very briefly, right? It like that little voice in your brain, you're like, what? And we just usually move on past it. And so I know that your framework is the step system, right? So support, trust, energy, persistence. What is for you an ultimate goal that you want people to understand as you continue to share your story and talk about the things that you've been through and where you're at today? Obviously, the system gives you, the things you want to be aware of, be people in the right places, those resources, believing in yourself, all of that. But if you could give a message, or what would you say is the overall determination that you are wanting to give to people as they continue to hear you speak?
All the things, right? You understand all the positivity and the mindset stuff and that work and everything. But I mean the number one thing, and I'm writing about this currently right now as I do a monthly newsletter, and that's actually one of the things I'm writing about is kind of reflecting back on the time that I was going through my voice issue. And just that when you're in the thick of it, when you're in the middle of it, I understand it can be hard. It can be discouraging. Uh, but I mean, and this isn't just with health issues or accidents or like trauma or abuse or and like you spoke about you have a story of abuse. So I mean, I've worked with people that have been abused. And it's really just keeping them focused on the next step. But the thing is, I think people give up way too soon. They,
Mm,
they give up way too soon before they see the fruits of their labor from all the work that they've done. And the reason I brought up what I'm writing about in my newsletter is I just think there are way too many people out there that again that just give up too soon, and they don't stick around long enough to realize the fruits of their hard work. Um, just keep going.
I love that. And I 100% agree with you, right? You're right. It's not an easy journey. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not for the way that society tries to make us believe, which is that you should have everything right in front of you at that moment and get it going and be able to do all the things. It's always been a journey. Everything that we've been through has always been a journey, right? Everything that you have been through, you now get to turn around and use to help lift other people. And I do believe that there are these two different mindsets, and I've been on both sides of them. There is the one that is, everything happens to me and woe is me, and how do I get out of this? But what you do is you perpetuate this circle this cycle that you continue to keep yourself in, right? Or you can choose to shift and take control and say, no, I choose not to believe this, right? I want to do something else. I'm curious to know, how do you think on how you control things, we'll say quote unquote. And I say this because I know when I was in my situation and I felt everything wasn't going the way it wanted to, I felt like I didn't have control of anything and there was no way for me to have control. Now I realize that it's really about following that voice and taking the small steps, but that is the ultimate control. But that control looks very different than I can only do this. I can only do that. Don't come to me if you need this. It's a very different type of control. And I'm curious to know, like, how are your thoughts on that word and how you use it, especially with everything that you've been through?
I, my goodness, I think you're only able to. This is going to sound counterintuitive, Kat, but the only way that you're able to get some semblance of control is to have 100% responsibility. And
Mm,
I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but one of the things that's helped me in my journey and throughout my entire life is something called Ho'oponopono.
yes,
You do, you're familiar
I
with it.
do. But explain it to the listeners because I love this.
Yeah, so Ho'oponopono is about accepting 100% responsibility for your life. And that may sound like I'm being overly overbearing or strict or something, but really all it is, and this is the beauty of it, all it is repeating four phrases just constantly throughout the day, no matter what you're doing. It's I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me, and thank you. You just keep repeating those phrases. And then what comes up in between you saying the phrases, what comes up in between is, I mean, within reason here, you have to make sure you're not going crazy, but within reason is it's inspiration. And what inspiration is God, the universe, whatever it is to you. Um, and if you just focusing on saying those four phrases and taking action whenever inspiration comes up to you, um, it makes life so much simpler. And I feel that that word control, if I can circle back to that, that word control is the only time you get control is when you let go of being in control. So you let go, when you stick to the four phrases and you let go of controlling everything and just taking action on what comes up, it's powerful. And you'll end up exactly where you need to be.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I was actually just recently, probably about 2 years ago, introduced to Ho'oponopono. And to me, it's a beautiful journey and it's a beautiful understanding of who we are as individuals. And we talked about this in the very beginning. A lot of my podcast over the last couple of months has really been about coming back to ourselves, coming back to who we are, to the present, to listening within instead of all the noise that's outside, because we are so overwhelmed right now by the noise everywhere, right? Socials, online, things that are sent to you in your email. If you watch the news, it is so overwhelming. And I do believe that it also keeps us playing small because it's showing us all of the things that we can't do, right? And there is this sense of peace, I guess I could say. I'd love to know what your word is, but there's this sense of peace when, like you said, you take the responsibility. And it's not that you're letting other people off the hook, right? People that have done what they have done to you or the things that have happened to you throughout your life, that's a part of who you are. And when we talk about forgiveness and taking responsibility, it's more on how you feel and how you've internalized that and being able to say, I want to make peace with that feeling instead of, I hate that I feel that way, which in my opinion, it kind of amplifies, that noise and that sound around. So I love that you say about control and that we ultimately do have to let go. That was a really hard one for me to figure out for a really long time, especially coming out of 10 years of abuse, because I didn't have control of anything. And so I needed, at that time, I felt I needed to control everything in my realm to make sure that I and my children were safe, that I and my children were taken care of, right? And it is that overbearing sense that we put out there that I think really can be detrimental to the ultimate journey that we are willing, that we want to be on, right? We dream about it. We see people online. We hear stories like yours, Nick, of people going through these things. And yet we're like, why am I still stuck? Why am I still stuck? Right. So if you are, let's say you're speaking with someone and they're kind of in this in-between realm, right? And you are talking with them about your step framework, but they're like, I just don't know if I can get over it. What are some of the things that you would suggest to them to kind of help start to learn to shift how they are perceiving and thinking about things so that they can get over that hump to start using your framework, but also go in the direction they want to go?
Sure, I love the question. It's I would say, Kat, when and I can even draw on experience over the last couple of months of like working with that young woman that was going through or just coming out of an abusive relationship is just, and as I'm sure you, because you probably worked with people as well in that situation, the sky is falling. Like it's that they can't see anything. So at that point, it's in the middle of a crisis, trauma, anything is just all right. Forget everything else, like all the great things and positivity and everything we talked about. Forget it. It doesn't matter. The only thing that we should be focusing on, and you should be focusing on right now, is what do I need to do today that's going to move me closer to either getting out of this situation or getting my health back from that detrimental situation that I unfortunately was in. Um, Nothing else matters. And if you just focus on one step at a time, day by day, like even to think a week ahead is too much for a lot of people. So just focus on what you can do today. Um, and then once you've completed that, then we can worry about the rest. But nothing else matters at this point.
I love that because it's almost kind of like zooming someone in, almost like when we talked in the very beginning when you said, as a teenager, your world is so squished and it's you only see this. But as you get older, you can kind of when you get in that space, you can kind of see the directions you want to go and stuff like that. And for people coming out of those situations, that can be very overwhelming. And it's really interesting because, when and again, I keep going back to social media because I think that it's a great tool to have, and it's also a very overwhelming tool to have. And there are so many things that aren't real that we see, but that's how we perceive it. And being aware of just because you see someone that is happy and has all the things and is doing all the things doesn't mean that that's what their entire life is. We are individuals and we are human beings. We are meant to have experiences. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. That's how you continue to go in different directions. I wouldn't want to be the same. I definitely wouldn't want to be the same as I was, 10, 15 years ago. But it's being able to understand that yes, there are people out there that are standing on top of their mountain, yet in order to get to that mountain, they had to start at the bottom. And that started with simple things like prepping for what you needed, conditioning before you even got to the mountain. What are the small things that had to take place before they even got to the point of being able to climb it? And I am a huge proponent of taking the small steps. So many of us feel like when we do the small things, it doesn't matter. And so we keep waiting for the big things to happen so that we can congratulate ourselves versus, like you said, start with day one. Start with what's in front of you. Start with what you can handle and know that and be okay with that. And then you can continue to build from that. But I definitely think that it's an inner celebration for ourselves as we're going through those things, to be proud of the things that we have accomplished, whatever that is, right? I'm sure that when you were in the hospital, the first thing that was in your head wasn't, I'm going to run out these doors and that's all I'm focused on. I'm sure that, as you took your first step, that was a celebration. As you started to be able to speak again, that was a celebration because you realized that those were starting to put you closer to your goal.
Everything, yeah, everything. And if I could zoom in even on my experience when I was in the hospital, the I think what enabled me to get to reach my goal, and reaching my goal, by the way, wasn't the finish line. If anything, it was the starting line. But to get there as quickly as I did, less than 60 days later after being transported to the rehab hospital, it was doing doing the work that the doctors and therapists told me I had to do to run out of the hospital, to get to where I wanted to go, doing that and then a little bit more, asking them, okay, you know my goal, because I share my goal with all of them. What do I need to be doing? What can I be doing in the way of extra exercises that's going to get me to my goal faster? So doing not only what's required, but doing a little bit more. Not so much that you're going to burn yourself out, but just a little bit more that you can be doing on nights, weekends, that kind of thing. Only by taking those small steps, and taking those small steps daily, like doing something daily,
Hmm.
no matter how small it is. It can even just be making a conscious decision on a particular day that you're going to like think about getting better and like do what you need to do. As long as you're doing something every day, you're helping yourself build that unstoppable momentum that's going to carry you through the hard times. Because this is life, this isn't a fairy tale. Everyone has hard times. So that momentum will help carry you through those hard times.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's the bigger thing is being okay with the small steps, right? I think of how many people are suffering from some form of something, right? Whether it's depression, anxiety, and all those things. And I do understand, and I've had people that I've talked with that have debilitating days, right? And sometimes it is those super tiny steps. I love the idea of just the thought of the next time this comes up, I'm going to choose to do something different or act in a different way. That's phenomenal. But I also think that it's again, it's being proud of yourself. And I think we have been
Oh, I'm sorry,
taught,
so I don't forget it.
yeah.
So by doing by doing that, even if it's little, um because back to your question, how am I, even if I'm doing something little, how is that helping me? Well, by doing something little, um you're helping yourself by generating that unstoppable momentum. I wanted to say, go ahead, I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
No, I love that. And I love this unstoppable momentum. I love this because I think that there's something powerful behind it instead of just saying like the resilience that you have, right? By continuing to push forward, even in the tiniest steps, you do become into a space where you're unstoppable because ultimately you are shifting how you perceive things, what things are considered scary. You're pushing yourself outside of your boundaries every single time that you do that, even if it's super small. And that neurologically, right, if we go into the science of it, really starts to actually change physiologically all the things that are going on. And then that stuff becomes a little bit easier and a little bit easier, right? So you can continue to push on. So no, I love that. And all the things with it. I still am just like mind blown about running, not walking out of the hospital, running out of the hospital after 90 days. Like that just it blows my mind. And I think of I guess my kids as well, like being that age, and I couldn't imagine handling that situation. And I just like congratulations and kudos to your parents, right? For knowing that like even though you may not consciously be aware of what's going on, your brain is always in taking that information. And they allowed you to make that choice on your own terms instead of already having things that were kind of playing in the background that could have shifted the way that you thought about how things were going to happen. I think that's wonderful. But I think that that comes to the power of not only belief, but how we listen to others about ourselves and how impactful it can be to maybe sometimes just let those go and make your own decisions on who you are and who you are as an individual and what it is that you choose to believe about yourself, right? You got that opportunity, I feel like, to do that, to create and customize your own way of how you plan to leave the hospital. You didn't have to listen to the beliefs and the words of others and that become your truth.
Well, they thought they were being positive and everything. They thought, okay, what, like, make a full recovery? That's a good goal. But I heard otherwise. I heard and if I could, I haven't even talked about this on podcast, but my parents were pretty young when they had me. They were only 22 when they had me. So that means, and I've been thinking about this lately because I'm 37 now. I'm like, I just can't imagine it that they had a 14, 13, or 14-year-old at my age. That's like me having a 13 or 14-year-old that gets in an accident like I did. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and the strength that your parents showed and things like that, I think is a testament to who you are and the direction that you're going and why you're sharing your story and why it's so impactful as well. Now, I know that you have the freebie for everyone, and you said that is an ebook on the step system. Is that correct? You want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so I'll give away a couple things. So if anything that I shared about my real estate journey and like buying homes creatively, buying and selling homes creatively without using any of our credit or money or investor money, frankly, for that matter, appeal to you, you can check out our website. You can go there and get registered for a free master's class at smartrealestatecoach.com/master's class. And there you'll be able to get registered for the free master's class and learn all about how we buy and sell on terms. And if by the end you want to learn more, you'll be able to. And then, believe it or not, I mean, we had a great conversation. Definitely a real chat with Kat. I can say that. Um, this was only like a 10,000 foot view of the STEP system. But if you go to nickprefontaine.com/step, you can download the entire STEP system for free and learn all about support, trust, energy, and persistence.
I'm so excited about that one. And we'll make sure we have both of those things in the show notes so that you guys can click on them and go to it directly to be in front of Nick. And of course, I'm totally dropping your Oxford top as talk as well. Good gracious. So that we can make sure everyone can watch that and listen and just hear what you have to say. Because I love your journey. I love your persistence. But I also love that you have this framework that really teaches people to lean in and be aware of the things that are around you and the resources there and having people in the right place and knowing how to believe in yourself and kind of focusing that energy, as you said, toward the process to continue to have that unstoppable momentum. So tell everybody where they can find you then and all the things as well before we close out.
Sure. I am on my website when you're there, the Nick Pre when you're there, download the ebook, step. You'll also see I think if you scroll down at the bottom of the page, you're gonna see links to both of my social media accounts. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me there. And yeah, if I can leave everyone on one parting thought is whatever you're going through, just take that first step towards it, because once you take that first step, your next step's always going to be available.
Oh, I love that. I love the parting words, Nick. Thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. I loved hearing your story and I love what it is you're doing for people now.
Thanks, Kat.
You are so welcome. To everybody else out there, Deep breath, because that was a lot of information to intake. Be sure to please check the show notes. You definitely want to download his ebook. Check out his step system. I think that it is a beautiful and easy way for us to learn to lean into ourselves and the things that are around us. So, as Nick said, you can continue to take one step at a time, moving forward. And as we are going into again the second quarter of 2026, for those of you that are like, the first 3 months sucked. That's okay. You have the whole rest of the year, right? And I believe that this year really is focused on how do we come back to us? How do we come back to our center or lean into our pieces that make sense for us? And as Nick talks about in his step system, leaning in to the right people, the right resources, knowing the process, believing in yourself, right? Having that trust and diverting that energy towards that, because there are some things that are outside of our realm. And honestly, I don't think that our energy is well spent if we're pushing it in that direction. So thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Nick, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast and sharing all of the things. And as we leave, until next time, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. Catch you later.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Real Chat with Kat today, where real stories meet real solutions. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review on Apple, and share this with someone who may also need to hear this as well. Let's also keep the conversation going. Follow me on socials at The Lotus Effect, connect with our incredible guests, and remember, you are never alone. Your story matters, and you have the ability and the power to rewrite it. You always have a choice. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and keep showing up as the incredible, unstoppable